My name is Claire Watson, and I'm 36 years old. People love to say blood is thicker than water, but no one tells you what it feels like when the people who share your blood look at you like you're a mistake they can't erase, so they just pretend you never existed. 10 years ago, my father gave me a choice that wasn't really a choice. If you marry him, he said, voice flat as stone, walk out of this house right now. The Watson family doesn't need a daughter who brings shame home. He said it like he was discussing the weather, like he wasn't cutting me off from everything I'd ever known. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, because it hurt so much my body went numb. I just stood there, staring at the polished hardwood floors that had reflected my footsteps since I was a child, and realized my entire life had been mapped out on those floors, and none of it belonged to me. I was born into old money in Connecticut, the kind of family people mention with a nod, the kind that sits on boards and smiles for charity galas. From the moment I could walk, my future was already written. Private schools, business degree, appropriate friends, and eventually inheriting the family company like it was a crown passed down through generations. My father, Robert Watson, always said, "Legacy is responsibility, Claire, not desire." But even as a kid, I felt wrong in that world. I love things that got under your nails. I love taking apart broken electronics and making them breathe again. While other kids in my circles were learning tennis grips and etiquette, I was sneaking to a repair shop after school just to watch a mechanic's hands move like magic over dead machines. My mother, Eleanor, called it tinkering, like it was a childish phase. What they didn't understand was that fixing something broken made me feel honest. Like for once, I wasn't performing. The breaking point came when my parents tried to finalize what they'd been grooming me for my whole life: marriage. They wanted me to marry Kyle Kingston. Perfect smile, perfect suit, perfect bloodline, the son of one of their strategic partners. He looked like a man built to stand beside me in family portraits and never ask who I really was. I told them no. And then I did something worse. I brought home Ethan Miller. Ethan was a public school teacher. He didn't have generational wealth. He didn't know what fork to use at a 10-course dinner. He had worn-out shoes and kind eyes, and when I talked about engines and circuit boards, he didn't laugh. He listened like it mattered. He loved me for the parts of me my family treated like defects. My mother didn't even try to hide her contempt. She looked Ethan up and down like he was a stain on white linen. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just pointed to the front door and said those words that would echo in my chest for a decade. If you marry him, walk out of this house right now. I remember Ethan's hand tightening around mine, like he was bracing for me to let go. I didn't. I looked at my father, then at my mother, and felt something inside me snap, quietly, cleanly, like a chain finally giving way. Then we'll build our own family, I said, and my voice surprised even me. From now on. We left Connecticut not long after that. We moved to Colorado, where the name Watson meant nothing, and nobody cared who my parents were. I started small, one cramped garage bay, a few tools, and a stubborn belief that I could build something with my own hands. Ethan kept teaching. We didn't have marble floors, or staff, or reputation to maintain, but we had peace. Then Avery was born. Our daughter. She had Ethan's warmth and my intensity, big brown eyes that missed nothing, and a heart so open it almost scared me. The kind of child who says thank you like it's sacred. The kind of child who waves at strangers because she genuinely hopes they're having a good day. I told myself I had done the right thing. I never regretted leaving. Not once. Because I knew if Ethan had stayed in that house, surrounded by polite cruelty and sharp-edged judgment, he would have been slowly suffocated. And I loved him too much to let that happen. 10 years passed. I thought the Watson family was a chapter I'd closed. Until one autumn afternoon, an envelope arrived. Thick cream paper, embossed letters, silver ink like a warning, dressed as elegance. You are cordially invited, Claire Watson and family, to the 65th birthday celebration of Mrs. Eleanor Watson. My fingers went cold around the invitation. It sat in our kitchen drawer for 3 days. I didn't tell Ethan. I didn't respond. I didn't even let myself think about it for too long, because I knew the second I did, the old anger would crawl out of the place I'd locked it away. The invitation wasn't even from my parents. It was from my uncle, Gregory Watson, and his wife, Victoria, the kind of people who can smile while twisting a knife and still convince the room it was your fault you bled. Gregory loved family unity, the way a person loves a stage, only if he's holding the spotlight. I knew it wasn't an olive branch. It was bait, a setup. A chance for them to parade the disgraced daughter in front of Connecticut's finest and remind everyone that the Watsons don't forgive, they tolerate when it benefits them. I was going to throw the envelope away the next morning. But that night, Avery was digging through the drawer for her craft scissors, and she found it. "Mom," she said, crawling onto the kitchen floor like it was treasure. "It has your name." I walked in and froze. Avery looked up at me, eyes bright with curiosity. "Is it Grandma's birthday?" My throat tightened. I had told her fragments over the years. Small stories, softened at the edges. A grandmother who used to bake apple pies. A summer house. A cat named Winston. The kind of memories I pretended didn't matter, until I realized my daughter had been collecting them like little seeds. "I've never met them," Avery whispered, like she was confessing something important. "But I imagine them." Then she tilted her head and said the sentence that cracked my armor in half. "I want to meet them, just once." I dropped to my knees beside her, and the worst part was, her hope was pure. She wasn't asking for money or gifts or status. She was asking for a hug she didn't even know she'd be denied. No 9-year-old should have to carry the weight of adult grudges. That night I told Ethan. He listened quietly, his face unreadable, not cold, not angry, just careful. Then he said softly, "Our daughter deserves to see where she comes from, whether it's to love it or to learn what not to become." So we went. We drove across Connecticut on a pale gray Saturday morning, the trees painted in that golden red autumn that makes everything look romantic, until you realize beauty doesn't erase danger. Avery fell asleep in the back seat, hugging her little backpack. Ethan sat beside me, quiet enough that I could hear my own heartbeat. I told myself I was ready. I wasn't. Because the moment our SUV rolled to a stop in front of the Watson estate, white columns, slate roof, iron gates, I felt 10 years collapse into a single breath. The house looked the same, but the air felt colder. Uncle Gregory opened the door. His face froze, just for a second, before the smile snapped into place. "Well," he drawled, voice dripping with forced surprise. "Claire, and you brought the whole family." His eyes slid to Ethan like Ethan was something stuck to my shoe. Victoria appeared behind him, perfectly styled, beige dress, probably worth more than my car, and that familiar smirk like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Ethan," she said, tasting his name like it was cheap. "Still teaching?" Ethan smiled calmly. "Still teaching." Victoria's gaze dropped to Avery. "And this must be the little one." Avery stepped closer to my leg, clutching my coat. Victoria's eyes narrowed, and she said, loud enough for the hallway to hear, "She looks simple." I felt Avery's shoulders sink. I wanted to turn around and walk out. But then we stepped into the main hall, and everything went silent. My mother was walking out from the living room carrying a large gift box. My father stood by a tea table with a glass of wine in his hand. Both of them froze mid-motion the second they saw me. My mother's eyes widened, then sharpened into something controlled and tight, like she was looking at a problem she thought she'd already solved. Before I could say a word, Avery stepped forward. She lifted her chin with a courage that made my chest ache. "Hello, Grandma. Hello, Grandpa." She gave a small bow, hands folded neatly in front of her dress. Her voice was quiet but clear. Ethan flinched slightly, like he was bracing for impact. I didn't know whether to feel proud or heartbroken. Avery looked up at my mother with hope, not for gifts, but for warmth. A smile, a hug. My mother pressed her lips together. Then she gave the smallest nod and muttered, almost reluctantly, "Yes, you've grown." That was it. No hug. No step forward. My father simply raised his glass and took a slow sip, eyes on me like I was an uninvited guest who'd ruined the timing of his life. And in that moment, I realized something with terrifying clarity. They didn't just disown me. They practiced it. They got good at it. And now my daughter was standing in front of them, offering love with both hands, while they measured whether she deserved to receive any back. The silence after my mother's, "Yes, you've grown," didn't fade. It spread, like cold water creeping across a floor, quiet, unstoppable, soaking into everything. Avery stayed standing there for a second longer than a child should have to, her hands still folded, posture still polite, waiting for something that wasn't coming. A hug. A smile. A sign that she hadn't just introduced herself to 2 statues. Then a voice sliced through the tension, bright and theatrical. "Claire, is that you?" Aunt Marianne, my father's older sister, came down the hall like she was rescuing the room from its own awkwardness. She moved fast, eyes wide, a hand flying to her chest as if she'd just spotted a ghost. And maybe she had. Because to this family, I'd been one. Marianne reached us and took my hands. squeezing like she could physically confirm I was real. I can't believe it. Eleanor, Robert, why didn't you tell me Claire was coming? My mother's smile appeared too late and too stiff. I was surprised myself, she said, voice almost rehearsed. Her eyes flicked, just briefly, toward Uncle Gregory. Gregory must have sent the invitation and forgotten to mention it. Uncle Gregory's lips twitched, but he recovered quickly, lifting his hands in mock innocence. Oh, you know me. I just wanted to bring the family together. I caught the way Victoria's gaze snapped to him, sharp, irritated, as if he'd missed a cue. Marianne's attention dropped to Avery. Her face softened instantly. And who is this beautiful girl? Avery straightened again, like she was determined to be brave, even if no one deserved it. I'm Avery, she said. I'm 9. Marianne smiled warmly. Well, Avery, you are absolutely adorable. It was the first kindness Avery had received since we walked in, and the fact that it came from the one relative who wasn't in power made it sting even more. Because kindness here wasn't normal. It was an exception. As Marianne guided us toward the main hall, I felt eyes following us from every corner. Relatives, family, friends, old acquaintances who used to watch me like I was an investment. Whispers rippled across the room. Some people offered polite smiles. Others looked straight at my parents first, waiting for cues, like their opinions needed approval. That was the Watson way. No one speaks until they know which direction the wind is blowing. My father's jaw tightened as he watched Uncle Gregory accept handshakes and compliments like a man hosting his own victory. Ethan leaned slightly toward me. We can leave, he murmured, barely moving his lips. I didn't answer yet, because Avery was looking around with that fragile curiosity, like she'd walked into a museum of people she was supposed to belong to. And I didn't want her first memory of them to be my back as I ran away. My mother clapped her hands lightly, switching into performance mode. Well, she said, brightening her voice, it's lovely to have everyone here today. She didn't look at me when she said it. Not once. Like if she ignored me hard enough, the room would forget I existed. A server approached with a tray of champagne flutes. They moved smoothly through the crowd, placing glasses in hands like crowning people with privilege. None came to us. Not to Ethan. Not to me. And certainly not to Avery. Instead, another staff member appeared, gesturing toward the far side of the hall. This way, please. We were ushered, not to the central tables, not to the seating plan arranged like a map of status, but to a small side table near a window, tucked behind a row of decorative plants. There was no tablecloth, no name cards. 3 small plates were already there, each with a limp salad that looked like it had given up on life hours ago. Avery climbed into her chair quietly, looking around as if she'd missed a step and ended up in the wrong room. The central table was everything you'd expect from my mother. Deep burgundy velvet runners, crystal glasses, tall white orchids, a towering 4-tier cake glowing under warm lights like a monument. The food on those tables came in waves: seared scallops, rich soups, steak cuts, so thick they looked obscene, lobster tails glistening in butter. Our table had salad, hard bread, and water. No menus. No silverware upgrade. No server checking if we needed anything. Avery leaned toward me and whispered, Mom, is this Grandma's birthday? I forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Yes, sweetheart. Avery's eyes moved from the cake to our sad plates, confusion beginning to bloom. Ethan sat down across from me, jaw tight, but his hand found mine under the table and squeezed once. The squeeze said, I'm here. It also said, this is deliberate. And that was the part that made my throat burn. Because I wasn't surprised they wanted to punish me. I was surprised they were willing to punish my child to do it. Across the room, Victoria stood near a cluster of women in expensive dresses, laughing softly. Her gaze flicked toward our table, then away, like she was checking a box. Uncle Gregory was playing the gracious host, shoulders back, voice loud, moving from group to group. A man approached him, smiling. Gregory, your mother looks wonderful. It must be so comforting to have you and Victoria handling everything. Gregory's smile didn't reach his eyes. Family is duty, he said smoothly. Some of us understand that. And as he said it, his eyes slid toward me. It was subtle, but it was aimed like a dart. Avery poked her salad once with her fork, then stopped. She looked up at Ethan. Dad, why is our table different? Ethan's face softened, but I saw the tension in his eyes, the struggle to answer a child without poisoning her. I leaned in, voice gentle. Maybe the servers haven't gotten to us yet. I hated myself for lying, but I needed time. Time to decide whether I was going to let this happen. A young waiter approached our table a few minutes later. He looked nervous, like he didn't want to be the messenger, but had been forced to deliver something ugly. He glanced at a clipboard, then at us. Sorry, this is table 12, right? I nodded slowly. His throat bobbed. I was instructed not to serve a main course to this table, just water and salad. Avery blinked. Once. Twice. Like her brain couldn't process the idea that adults could be that cruel on purpose. Ethan's hand tightened around his fork. I felt a rush of heat in my ears, anger so sharp it made my vision pulse. But the waiter looked like he was about to cry. He wasn't the enemy. He was just the one forced to carry the weapon. I swallowed hard and lowered my voice. That's fine, thank you. The waiter exhaled like he'd been holding his breath and hurried away. Ethan leaned forward, voice low. Claire. We can leave, I whispered. Avery looked between us, sensing something, but not understanding it. Ethan's eyes flashed toward the main table, where my mother sat like a queen, receiving offerings. Then he looked back at Avery, and something in his expression steadied. He said softly, whatever you want, I'm with you. I turned to Avery, forced warmth into my face. Sweetheart, do you want to stay a little longer? Avery hesitated. Then she nodded, small, careful. I want to give Grandma my gift. My stomach dropped. Your gift? I echoed. Avery's fingers clutched the strap of her little backpack. I brought something. I made it. Ethan's eyes widened just slightly, and when he looked at me, I realized Avery and Ethan had planned this. Without me. Not to betray me, but to help. To fix what I'd told Avery was broken. My daughter thought love could repair anything if you wrapped it neatly enough. I swallowed hard. Okay, I said, voice tight. We'll stay. Across the room, Victoria lifted her chin, voice carrying just enough to reach nearby ears. Sitting separately works, honestly, she said with a laugh that wasn't a laugh. Gives each family their own space. No need for small talk. A few people chuckled awkwardly. A few looked down. Avery turned to me, whispering, Mom, what did she mean? I brushed Avery's hair back gently. Nothing you need to worry about. But inside, my thoughts sharpened into something cold. They weren't just excluding us. They were displaying us, like a warning, like an example. The party dragged on. Speeches, toasts, gift after gift placed at my mother's feet like tribute. Luxury boxes stacked high, watches, jewelry, silk scarves, art pieces wrapped in velvet and ribbon like money pretending to be love. Then the MC tapped the microphone and announced brightly, and now we invite the great-grandchildren to present their gifts to our beloved Eleanor Watson. A wave of children poured forward. Cousins Avery had never met, dressed in polished outfits, hair perfect, shoes shining. They carried glossy brand-name bags that swung from their wrists like status symbols. Avery watched them with quiet intensity. Not jealousy, not greed, something worse, a longing to belong. Then she leaned toward me and whispered the sentence that made my breath catch. Mom, I have a gift for Grandma, too. Ethan reached into Avery's backpack slowly, carefully, like he was handling something sacred. He pulled out a blue fabric-covered notebook. It wasn't fancy. No ribbon, no logo, just a simple notebook with a hand-drawn label on the front, written in uneven letters. Grandma Eleanor's stories. My throat tightened. Avery whispered, I wrote it myself. Every time you told me stories about when you were little, I wrote them down. I drew pictures, too. I stared at her, because I had spent 10 years trying to bury those memories, and my daughter had been collecting them like they were treasure. Ethan leaned close and murmured, She asked me to help her keep it a secret. She wanted it to be special. Avery's fingers gripped the notebook. Her shoulders rose with a deep breath. She slid out of her chair. The MC was still smiling, still gesturing grandly as another child presented a diamond bracelet. But then Avery stepped into the aisle. Small, plain dress that I had sewn with love. Brown shoes. No sparkle. No brand. Just her. She raised her voice, clear and steady. I have a gift for Grandma, too. The room shifted, like everyone turned at once. And in that turning, you could feel it. That sharp curiosity people get when they think they're about to watch someone get humiliated. Uncle Gregory's smile twitched. Victoria's brows lifted, irritation flashing openly now. My mother's hand paused mid-toast, her eyes narrowing as Avery approached, like a tiny comet headed straight for a wall of ice. Avery stopped in front of her. She held out the notebook with both hands the way Ethan had taught her. Polite, respectful, gentle. My name is Avery, she said softly. You haven't met me before, but my mom told me about you. My mother's lips pressed together. Avery continued anyway, voice trembling just slightly, but she didn't stop. She told me about the apple pies you used to bake, and the little summer house, and Winston the cat. My heart squeezed painfully, because I hadn't told those stories often. But Avery had listened like they were bedtime prayers. So I wrote them down, Avery said, and her eyes lifted, hopeful, brave. I want you to read it, to remember your happiest days. No one spoke. It wasn't dramatic silence. It was stunned silence, like the room didn't know what to do with sincerity. My mother stared at the notebook. For one long moment, she didn't move, and I felt panic rise in my chest. Because if she rejected Avery too, if she made my child feel small in front of all these people, I didn't know if I could stop myself from burning this entire family to the ground with words. Then my mother reached out, slowly, and took the notebook. Her fingers brushed Avery's hands, just barely, but that tiny contact made Avery's face brighten like she'd been given sunlight. My mother opened the cover. The first page was Avery's crooked handwriting. My mom said Grandma made the best pies. Next page, a drawing. A long-haired woman hugging a little girl in front of an old stove, steam rising from a pie. My mother's gaze froze. Her throat moved once, like she was swallowing something sharp, and then her shoulders trembled. It was so small I almost thought I imagined it. But I didn't. I saw her eyes glisten. My mother sat down slowly, still holding the notebook against her chest, like she was cradling something fragile. No diamonds. No luxury bag. Just a child's memories, stitched together with love. And for the first time since we arrived, the room didn't feel like it belonged to Uncle Gregory. It belonged to Avery. My mother turned the pages, one by one, slowly, as if the paper might cut her, and in her face I saw something crack open. Not softness. Not yet. But recognition, like she had been forced to remember the version of herself she buried under pride. Avery stood there, hands clasped, waiting. My father's glass lowered slightly in his hand. Uncle Gregory looked like someone had slapped him. Victoria's smile had vanished entirely. My mother kept reading. Then she stood. The room held its breath. She stepped toward Avery and knelt down so she was eye level with my daughter. And she said, voice low, rough around the edges, "Thank you, Avery." She paused, like the next words cost her something. "This is more special than anything I've received tonight." Avery blinked fast, trying not to cry. My chest burned, because in that moment, my daughter had done what I couldn't do for 10 years. She reached across the gap, and somehow she didn't fall. But the way Uncle Gregory's eyes darkened told me something else too. This wasn't over, because people like him don't forgive a child for stealing the spotlight. And Victoria? Victoria was already planning the next move. I could see it in the tight set of her jaw, in the way her fingers gripped her clutch like it was a weapon. And as my mother stood there with Avery's notebook pressed to her chest, trembling like she'd been haunted by her own past, I realized something terrifying. Avery's gift didn't just soften my mother. It threatened the entire structure Uncle Gregory and Victoria had built. And when you threaten someone's power, they don't just get embarrassed. They get dangerous. A month passed after the birthday party. On the surface, life went back to normal. Colorado mornings, Ethan grading papers at the kitchen table, Avery humming while she packed her lunch, me opening the shop before sunrise, hands greasy, mind clear. But underneath it all, something had shifted. My mother never called. Neither did my father. There was no follow-up message, no apology, no explanation for the humiliation, the side table, the silence. And somehow that felt intentional, like they were waiting to see if that moment with Avery's notebook had been a weakness or a mistake. I told myself it didn't matter. We hadn't gone back to be accepted. We went for Avery, and she was fine. She talked about Grandma's big house, with childlike wonder, not noticing the coldness beneath the chandeliers. She drew pictures of an old woman reading a blue notebook, smiling softly. I didn't correct her. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, while I was elbow deep in an engine rebuild, my phone rang. Unknown Connecticut number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Claire, my father's voice, lower than I remembered. Slower, like it had been sanded down by something heavy. I didn't speak. Your body knows before your mind does. My grip tightened on the phone. The shop noise faded. Your mother? He stopped, cleared his throat. She had a heart attack this morning. The world tilted. She's stable, he continued quickly, like he was afraid I'd hang up. They're monitoring her, but I thought you should know. There was a pause, then quieter. I didn't tell Gregory or Victoria yet. That sentence told me everything. They weren't there. I leaned against the workbench, breathing slowly. We'll come. Another pause. Then, almost reluctantly, thank you. I didn't tell Avery right away. That night, Ethan and I packed in silence. Not frantic, measured, like people who knew this trip carried weight. Avery sat on the bed, swinging her legs, watching us. Why are you packing? She asked. I knelt in front of her and brushed her hair back. Grandma isn't feeling well. Mommy and Daddy need to go see her for a few days. Avery's eyes widened. Is she going to be okay? I nodded, hoping it was true. The doctors are helping her. Avery jumped off the bed and ran to her desk. I'll draw her something, so she feels better. Of course she would. That's who she was. We left Avery with Ethan's closest friend down the street. I hugged her longer than usual, breathing her in like I needed to store the feeling. Be good, I whispered. She nodded solemnly. Tell Grandma I'm thinking about her. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and quiet panic. My mother lay in a recovery room, smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her skin was pale, her hair flattened against the pillow, hands thin enough that I could see blue veins beneath the skin. My father stood in the corner. No suit, no authority, just a wrinkled dress shirt and red-rimmed eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I sat down and took my mother's hand. I'm here, I said quietly. Her eyelids fluttered. She didn't speak, but her fingers tightened, just slightly, around mine. That was enough. Gregory and Victoria arrived the next day. They came with a glossy fruit basket wrapped in cellophane and a bouquet that looked expensive but smelled faintly artificial. Victoria asked a few questions in a tone that sounded concerned but felt rehearsed. Gregory stood behind her, arms crossed, silent. They stayed 15 minutes. Before leaving, Victoria said, I have been managing the household accounts this month. There are some things that need urgent attention. Staff, partners, guests. She adjusted her purse. I'll handle it. She didn't ask if we needed help. She didn't offer to stay. They left and didn't come back. Just messages. Is everything stable? Let us know if anything urgent comes up. Urgent, apparently, did not include sitting by a hospital bed. Ethan and I stayed. We took shifts without discussing it. I handled paperwork, doctors, insurance forms. Ethan handled everything else. He changed towels, adjusted pillows, wiped my mother's face with a warm cloth like it was the most natural thing in the world. I offered to hire a private nurse. He shook his head. I've got this. And the thing that stunned me most? My mother let him. At night, Ethan spoke to her. About Avery. About school projects and spelling tests and the way Avery insisted on feeding stray cats despite my protests. He spoke like she could hear him. Like she mattered. On the third night, Avery called on FaceTime. Her face filled the screen, framed by messy hair and worry. Mom, Dad, did Grandma open her eyes? I tilted the phone so Avery could see my mother. She's resting. Avery held up a drawing. I made this for her. It's a chair with wheels so she can go outside. Ethan smiled gently. She'll love it. We taped Avery's drawings to the wall by the bed. Apple pies. A small house. A woman reading a blue notebook. On the fourth day, the doctor told us my mother was stable and ready to move to a regular room. As they wheeled her down the hallway, she whispered, barely audible, Thank you for coming back. Not forgive me. Not I was wrong. Just that. And for the first time, I understood something painful and important. She didn't know how to apologize yet, but she was trying to stay alive. The regular room had a window overlooking a bare winter garden. Ethan brought lotion, soft towels, even a small speaker to play quiet music. He moved around the room with calm confidence, like he belonged there. My father watched. At first, silently, then more closely. One evening, after Ethan finished adjusting the blankets, my father spoke. Ethan, he said, voice stiff but controlled, you're taking very good care of her. Ethan didn't look up. She needs it. Simple. Honest. My father nodded once and turned toward the window. And in that nod, I saw something shift. A reevaluation. Not of Ethan. Of himself. By the end of the week, my mother could speak in slow, measured sentences. She asked about Avery, asked about Colorado, asked hesitantly about the shop, And one morning, when Ethan stepped out to get coffee, my mother looked at me and said quietly, She has a good heart. I knew she meant Avery, but I also knew who else she was finally seeing. 1 week after my mother was moved to a regular room, the atmosphere changed. Not dramatically, not loudly. It was subtle, like the hospital air itself had shifted from survival to consequence. That morning, my father entered the room with a man I recognized immediately, even though I hadn't seen him in over a decade. Mr. Davis, the Watson family attorney. Navy suit, thin-rimmed glasses, leather briefcase held like it contained something heavier than paper. My stomach tightened. My father cleared his throat. Your mother asked to see him. Ethan and I exchanged a glance. My mother sat more upright than she had in days, blanket folded neatly across her lap. Her hair was brushed, her face still pale but composed, like she was preparing for a meeting she had postponed for too long. Mr. Davis opened the briefcase and placed a folder gently on the bedside table. The title page read, Amendment to the Will, Eleanor Watson. He spoke calmly, professionally, but every word landed like a weight. The previous will, he said, designated Gregory Watson and Victoria Watson as primary beneficiaries of 70% of Mrs. Watson's personal assets. The remainder was assigned to the Watson family charity under their exclusive management. I felt Ethan's fingers tighten around mine. And Claire Watson, Mr. Davis continued, glancing briefly at me, was excluded. I didn't react. I already knew that version of the truth. Then he turned the page. The revised will states the following. My mother's voice cut in, low but steady. Read it. Mr. Davis nodded. Primary heir, Avery Watson, granddaughter, entitled to 70% of Eleanor Watson's personal assets. Ethan inhaled sharply. My heart skipped. 20% of assets will be allocated to establish the Eleanor Watson Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to children's education and healthcare. Mr. Davis looked up briefly. Trustees, Claire Watson and Ethan Miller. I stared at my mother. She didn't look away. The Fairfield estate, he continued, will become property of the foundation. Avery Watson may reside there until adulthood. Claire Watson is designated sole legal guardian of residence during that time. I shook my head slowly. Mom! Mr. Davis raised a hand gently. 10% of the estate's total value will be granted to Gregory and Victoria Watson, alongside a lump sum of $75,000 in symbolic recognition of past logistical assistance. Symbolic. That word felt intentional. No authority, Mr. Davis added, to manage, influence, or control any foundation or estate assets. Silence filled the room. It wasn't celebratory. It wasn't victorious. It felt heavy. I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the floor. We didn't come back for money, I said, voice tight. We don't want this. My mother looked at me for a long moment. No defensiveness, no anger, just the steady gaze of a woman who had finally decided something and wasn't going to be moved. This part, she said slowly, isn't for you. She turned her head slightly, eyes drifting toward Avery's drawings taped to the wall. It's for her, I swallowed. For the child, my mother continued, who reminded me of who I used to be before I started confusing control with love. Ethan stood, still holding my hand. He didn't say a word. My mother's voice softened, but it didn't weaken. She didn't ask for anything. She gave me memories I had buried, and your husband, her eyes flicked to Ethan, gave me care without calculation. I shook my head again. That doesn't mean you owe us. I'm not paying a debt, she interrupted. I'm making a choice. 2 days later, Gregory and Victoria stormed into the hospital room without knocking. Victoria's heels struck the floor like punctuation marks. I hear Mr. Davis has been visiting frequently, she said sharply. Seems like there are decisions being made without the rest of the family. Gregory folded his arms. You changed the will? My mother met his gaze without flinching. Yes. Victoria laughed softly, the sound brittle. After everything we've done? After 15 years of carrying the family? My father stepped forward. You carried control, he said quietly, not loyalty. Gregory's face flushed. I ran the main property, managed accounts, took care of everything while Claire ran off. And disappeared, my mother said, voice cutting through his, when I needed you most. Silence. Then my father spoke again, slower this time. You invited Claire without telling us, humiliated a child, then vanished for 3 days while your mother lay in intensive care. Victoria's mouth opened, closed. My mother leaned back against her pillow, exhaustion in her eyes, but also clarity. Ask yourselves this, she said softly. Did you ever care about me, or just what I owned? Neither of them answered. Victoria turned on her heel and left. Gregory followed, eyes dark, jaw clenched. The door shut behind them. Heavy. Final. That night, Ethan and I sat in the hospital garden, lavender bushes swaying in the cold. Do you think we should accept it? I asked. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he said gently, we don't need everything. Avery needs respect. If she finally sees that, the rest doesn't matter. The next morning, when Mr. Davis returned with the finalized documents, I raised my hand. We have a proposal. My mother looked up. So did my father. We don't want the estate, I said calmly. Not all of it. We want to reallocate a large portion to the foundation. Education, healthcare, something real. I paused. And we'll keep only what's needed to care for you and give Avery stability. My mother's eyes filled, not with tears this time, but with something deeper. I spent half my life believing family was something you managed, she whispered. Only when you learned to say no did I realize you had grown stronger than anything I tried to build. My father placed a hand on my shoulder. He didn't apologize, but he didn't pull away either. And that was new. My mother was discharged from the hospital 3 days later. The doctors recommended a private recovery facility, round-the-clock nurses, state-of-the-art monitoring, and enough quiet to heal without interruption. She refused. "I want to go home," she said simply. The word home hung in the air, heavier than any medical recommendation. My father didn't argue, he just nodded once. And that was how, without ceremony or announcement, our family moved back into the Watson estate, not as heirs, not as victors, but as caretakers. I took a temporary leave from the shop. Ethan arranged for substitute coverage at school. Avery thought we'd won the lottery. She ran through the halls, calling the upstairs bedroom my little castle, taping her drawings everywhere like she was planting flags of belonging. At first, the house felt wrong. Too quiet. Too formal. My father and I spoke only about medication schedules and follow-up appointments. Nothing else. No past. No future. My mother watched Ethan carefully, how he cooked soft meals, how he checked on her at night, how he listened instead of correcting. One afternoon, she asked Sarah. She stopped herself, then corrected quietly, "Ethan." It was the first time she'd ever said his name without tension wrapped around it. That night, she asked him, "Could you show me how to turn on the front camera? I want to see Avery when I call." Ethan didn't make a comment. He didn't smile in victory. He simply took her phone and recorded a short tutorial, sending it to her with a single message. "Anytime." 2 weeks later, Gregory emailed Mr. Davis requesting a formal review of the will due to lack of consensus. My mother read it, deleted it. Then she received a call from a distant cousin, tone careful, apologetic. "Eleanor, some people are concerned. They say you've changed too suddenly." My mother replied evenly, "I didn't change. I finally woke up." That was the end of it. Gregory came by once more, asking to speak to my father privately. When he left, his shoulders sagged like someone carrying a loss that couldn't be negotiated. After that, silence. No emails, no calls, no holiday cards. And for the first time in years, the house felt honest. Evenings became quieter, softer. Avery sat beside her grandmother while she told stories, not curated ones, not legacy ones, but real ones. The time she missed the bus on her wedding day. The biology test she failed because she fell asleep studying. Avery listened wide-eyed. "Grandma," she said once, "you're just like me." My mother laughed, a real laugh, startled and unguarded. I watched from the doorway, Ethan's arm around my shoulders. We weren't perfect. There were days my father forgot Avery's birthday. Moments when my mother complained that Ethan's soup was bland. Nights when I closed the bedroom door and wondered if old wounds ever truly healed. But this time, no one walked away. My mother learned to apologize. Not loudly, not dramatically, but sincerely. Sometimes it was just a hand resting on Ethan's arm after a sharp remark. My father learned to listen, really listen. And me? I learned that forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who deserves peace. A year later, the estate hosted a holiday unlike any before. No private chef, no guest list, just family. Ethan's homemade stew, an apple pie Avery baked with her grandmother. Red wine, my father selected himself from the old cellar he once forbade me from entering. Children ran through the yard laughing, unaware of the fractures that once defined this place. My mother knitted by the fire. My father cut fruit, juice dripping onto his sleeve without concern. Ethan stood at the stove, humming softly. I watched it all like a memory being rewritten in real time. Ethan handed me a warm slice of pie and whispered, "Our whole family is here." He was right. Not because everyone was present, but because the ones who mattered chose to stay. We returned to Colorado months later. The estate still belonged to Avery, but it no longer owned us. As the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, I turned to Ethan and said softly, "We're not richer in money." He smiled. "We're richer in family." Sometimes what people need most isn't perfect love. It's to be seen, to be acknowledged, and to be given the space to relearn how to belong.